Because these wing halves are joined permanently, there's some things I want to do now while it's easier. I'm going to be using retracts with this plane, so the first thing I want to do is open up the wheel well areas. But first I want to make sure that the covering's stuck down around the edges of the wells. Then as I cut the covering away, I want to seal the inside edges of it down to the inside edges of the wheel wells. This is just to help ensure that the covering stays tight later when I have to shrink out wrinkles. And I'll work my way around all the edges on both of the wheel wells. This is also a good time to fish some strings down through the wing structure to holes where we're going to bring the servo cables out. This is way easier to do now before we join these wing halves. I just put a good sized spring clip on the end of the yarn and run that down through the wing and then pull it out at the hole near the root of the wing. Because I have aileron and flap leads both coming out of the same hole, I tape the ends of the string down and mark them for which servo they go to. This just saves some messing around later. The servos haven't arrived for the wing yet, so I'm going to tape this end of the string down also, just to make sure that it doesn't slip down into the wing. I want to install the hinges and control horns now in the wings, and this is a good time to try out that Epo Grip long set epoxy. We should have between 4 and 5 hours of working time, and it takes overnight to set completely. But what's really nice about this is that it doesn't go anywhere once you put it onto the part. This is a 50-50 mix epoxy, so we scoop out equal amounts of both components. I would find out a little later that it's real easy to scoop out too much. But that'll get better with some time, get some experience using this stuff. Eric, the fellow that makes this epoxy, stresses that you want to fold this stuff together, not just stir it up. And once you get the hang of doing that, you can see that this mixes a lot better and a lot more thoroughly. And since it stays like Vaseline, you don't have to worry about it running off the side of the board or anything. You just scoop it up, flatten it out, and keep doing that until you get it all mixed up. Imagine being able to spread epoxy like peanut butter and have it stay where you put it. This is such an easy way of applying an adhesive. You just spread it on and you don't worry about it dripping off the other side while you're doing this side. And then you just push the part into its position, in this case a hinge, and any excess that comes out around it, we just wipe off with a paper towel and then go over that with a paper towel with some alcohol on it. And that's it. You're not going to come back later and find a big drip of epoxy running down the wing. I'm so excited by this I even dropped my knife. And on top of everything else, everybody that I talk to that's actually used this epoxy thinks it's the strongest epoxy they've ever used. I'm sold. We have to install the servo mounting blocks into the servo doors. And that's okay because I've had a number of the factory installed ones fall off. I mixed up some more of that long set epoxy and dived it onto the ends of the servo blocks where they mount into the doors. And because this stuff doesn't run, I can put more on the first time around and get a better joint. I don't have to come back later and build up a fillet around it. Just put some light clamping pressure on them and wait till the next day. Here I'm using the rounded end of the palette knife to make a nice rounded little fillet. Now that the servos have arrived, I can use my strings to pull the cables through. I've already added the right length extension to each one of the servo cables and then closed the connection with some heat shrink tubing rather than a clip. And then I just pull the wires through and run them out through the exit holes at the root of the wing. And then I can use some good screws to secure the servo doors into the wing. I harden all of these threads with some thin CA. And now we can make up the control linkages using carbon fiber tubing and titanium 440 ends. These make very light but very rigid control linkages. And I always use the 24-hour JB weld for assembling them. With control rods like this, it's easy enough to figure out the whole thing and glue them up to length right away. Sometimes it's easier to do one end at a time to get it right. I use light backstrokes with a razor saw to cut this tubing, and it cuts pretty easily. And then I assemble it once more to test the fit to make sure that it's right. Put a generous amount of the JB weld on both of the rod ends, insert them into the tubing, and pull them in and out a little bit to work the JB weld into the tubing. I'll spin the rod end while I'm moving it in and out to make sure I get the most JB weld as I can in there. Then it's important to secure both of the rod ends fully seated in the tubing until it dries, because air pressure inside will push the ends out. We just wrap it with masking tape or something and leave it go until tomorrow. Then the next day we can install the linkages and make any final adjustments. These linkages are very strong and very light. I've never had one fail. Since I might have to do the initial flights with the fixed landing gear, I'm leaving the wheel wells out until we get the retracts and install those. And now with the spar in place, we use the template they give you, slide that on and tape it to the wings so it's perfectly aligned, and then we can drill out for the alignment pins. This is an important step, so we want to take the time to get this template just right and tape it in place. And then carefully drill the hole for the wooden dowels. Keeping the drill straight makes it easier to join the wings later. I join the wings using the 4 to 5 hour EPO grip epoxy. This is another job that's just way easier with this paste-like consistency. You can lay it on a little thick and don't have to worry about it running or dripping or anything. And then with a good coat on both surfaces, you can take your time putting this together and make sure you get the fit right. And this is where I realized that this wing's a lot longer than it looks like when you got it in two pieces. I sprayed some alcohol on a paper towel to clean up the excess that squeezed out. And this gives you a nice, clean, even joint. All that's left now is to put the wing aside and let it sit till tomorrow, and we're going to start working on the fuselage.